Do the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers have the best rivalry in the NFL? I think there's a legitimate argument, but I will say this year is going to look a lot different than past years. Welcome to the Baltimore Ravens versus Pittsburgh Steelers Sunday football breakdown. If you're new here and you've never been to one of these videos, welcome. My name is Max. I make these every single week to help you with your fantasy start sits as well as your higher or lower projections. We break down all the data, all the scheme information to give you the best information possible. So if you're new, you like this type of stuff, make sure you subscribe below. And if you enjoy these types of videos, you've been here before, make sure you like the video so I know that you like and enjoy these kinds of videos. Without further ado, though, we're going to get into it. We're going to start with the coverage matrix. If you guys have never seen a coverage matrix before, it's very, very simple. It outlines the different types of defenses that teams play, as well as how often they play them. We're going to start by looking at this Pittsburgh Steelers offense against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, you probably don't need me to tell you that the Baltimore Ravens are not great against opposing wide receivers. We saw it with Jamar Chase. We've really seen it all year long. We saw it with Jamar Chase last week, 250 and 3 touchdowns. I expected a big game from George Pickens, but I want to make sure we get on the same page with what the Ravens like to do defensively. So we're going to look at the man and zone percentages overall. So you look at the overall man percentages, and you got the Baltimore Ravens right here, the 14th most man coverage in the NFL. But when you sort by zone, it's the 18th most zone coverage in the NFL. A team that's actually been pretty zone heavy to start the year has not dropped off, but changed what they've been doing a little bit because of how bad their defense has been playing. Maybe they think they're worse when they play zone. They traded for Trey White. What do they do with Trey White? Do they play more zone? I don't know. We'll see if he even plays, how much he plays this Sunday. But this defense is going to play a little bit more man than zone. And when you look at Russell Wilson in terms of overall fantasy points per drop back against man versus zone, you can see there's a pretty big difference, to be honest with you. You look here. Where did he go? I just saw him. You look... Pittsburgh Steelers, Russell Wilson, in the 3 games he's played, technically because one of them was a bye, 5th most fantasy points per snap or per drop back against man coverage. The Baltimore Ravens are going to play a little bit more man than zone. You expect Russ to have a little bit more success, which is a very interesting thing to note because Russell Wilson, when you compare those numbers against zone, is a little bit worse, but still pretty good. The bottom line is Russ is playing his behind off. And against this Ravens defense that hasn't been great against the secondary all year long, I think he's going to have to throw the ball. Let's look at some wide receiver information before we talk any more about that. When you look at this Baltimore Ravens defense, the target rates they face pretty clearly out wide, and a lot of it, right? You look down, 9th most out wide targets in the NFL, at least target rate, 42.8%. That would explain big games from guys like Jamar Chase, guys like, we'll scroll down a little bit here for the game logs against, guys like, excuse me, I got the wrong thing here. There we go. Wide receivers like Jamar Chase, wide receivers like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, wide receivers like Cedric Tillman, Cortland Sutton. The list goes on and on. People have had really big games against this Ravens secondary all year long. And a lot of those guys are out wide receivers, right? Like Cedric Tillman, the primary out wide guy for the Cleveland Browns. Cortland Sutton, the primary out wide guy for the Denver Broncos. This past week, Jamar Chase, because there was no T. Higgins, more out wide routes than normal. Now, Jamar Chase is Jamar Chase. He still had 193 against the secondary when he was pretty balanced between the slot and out wide. But you look at the other players throughout the entire year, a guy like Devontae Adams, when he was in Vegas, primarily out wide. A guy like Rashee Rice kind of balanced back and forth, but another 100-yard receiver. These guys haven't been able to stop elite receivers all year long. And again, the target rates, you see it, 9th highest out wide in the NFL. Now we can scroll through the rest. The slot target rates all the way down at the bottom right here. The 4th lowest. They're not going to throw out wide against the slot. The inline target rate right in the middle here, the 17th most. And the back target rate a little bit higher, but nothing crazy, just above average at 16.4%. So the bottom line is this. The Pittsburgh Steelers are going to throw the football out wide. They're going to throw the football out wide a decent amount, too. When you look at the overall passing offense for this Pittsburgh Steelers team, too, when Russell Wilson has been playing, I want to make a very clear distinction here. Most of the numbers we are looking at right now are when Russell Wilson played, at least offensively for the Steelers, because this offense has looked very different. So he's played week 7 through 10. Week 9 was a bye week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But you look at that, then you look at the out wide target rate here. Scroll down a little bit here. Pittsburgh Steelers, 39%, but still by far the highest percentage on their entire team. They are throwing to inline tight ends a little bit more. That's what I've noticed. 7th most inline target rate in the NFL with Russell Wilson playing. So that's been a lot more for Pat Freiermuth. And again, Pat Freiermuth looking at these projections, which, by the way, you guys can get on Underdog. If you click that link below, they'll give you a deposit bonus up to $1,000, as well as a free pick of Justin Herbert throwing for at least 1 yard on Sunday Night Football if you join with code LEADS. Again, link for that's below. If you want to make your predictions on these picks, again, you can click that. You can go to my link tree, click that thing right there. Justin Herbert, half yard on Underdog. Make sure you take advantage. But we go back to these wide receiver routes. And again, Pittsburgh Steelers are throwing the ball 16.9% of the time to opposing tight ends. Pat Freiermuth's projections only 26.5 yards. I think that's a little bit low. When you look at George Pickens, though, 69.5 to me is way too low. I think this could be another 100-yard game for George Pickens. He's been playing extremely, extremely well. You look at the last 3 weeks with Russell Wilson, 5 catches for 91 yards on 7 targets, 4 catches for 74 yards on 5 targets, and then 5 catches for 111 yards on 9 targets. Russ is getting him the ball. He's throwing him the football down the field, and that's what George Pickens is great at. And his longest reception projection on Underdog is also only 27 yards. I think that's a little bit too low. And my memory serves me correctly, he's had a reception of 27 plus in each of those 3 games with Russ. But the bottom line with this Steelers offense is they're going to throw the football out wide. They're going to throw the football wide and in line a little bit more with Russell Wilson. The matchup for the Steelers is much more beneficial on the outside. Even with Marlon Humphrey, we've seen it before. These guys cannot cover wide receivers on the outside. Now, I do want to make a clear distinction, and we should look at this before we say anything else. The wide receivers who are running routes from the outside for the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously it's George Pickens, right? Obviously George Pickens has an extremely high out wide rate, 71.7%. But Mike Williams actually has a higher out wide rate overall this year. This is including Jets, higher out wide rate than George Pickens does. But you look at week 10, that was the only game that Mike Williams played. The route distribution there, wait for this to load a little bit. George Pickens, 21 routes. Van Jefferson, 16 routes. Mike Williams, 5 routes. Does that mean Van Jefferson is going to have more out wide routes in Mike Williams' second ever game on the Pittsburgh Steelers? I don't know. The percentages are decently close enough to make me think that Mike Williams, if he plays more, will probably take some of Van Jefferson's routes. The bottom line is this. You look at both of their projections. They're a little low. I think most yardage projections for Mike Williams and Van Jefferson really should be taken higher. I'm going to be honest with you. I think it could happen in one play. It happened in one play with Mike Williams last week. And if you got George Pickens on your fantasy team, he's an absolute must start. He's a top 10 fantasy wide receiver this week. Russ is another top 10 fantasy quarterback this week. Get those guys in your lineup. Now, George Pickens, the out wide guy. We've talked a lot about passing with the Steelers defense or Steelers offense, and I haven't really told you why or showed you why. Well, I can show you this. The Baltimore Ravens are allowing the fewest rush yards per game. They're allowing the 7th fewest rush attempts overall, which will probably put them top 5 in terms of rush attempts per game. Yards per carry, the fewest in the NFL. And they do everything they can to stop the run, but the reality is they're so bad against the pass that teams are just going to throw the ball on them regardless. Like you look at game logs against, again, Joe Burrow threw the ball 56 times last week. Bo Nix threw it 33, which is a lower number. Jameis Winston, 40 plus. Baker Mayfield, 40 plus. Jaden Daniels, 35, which is a lot for Jaden Daniels. Joe Burrow, almost 40 again. Josh Allen, a little bit lower at 29. Dak, 50 times. Gardner Minshew, almost 40 times. And then Mahomes, week 1, a much closer game, 30 times. Russ is going to throw the ball a good amount. And again, you look at some of his projections. 226 passing yards for me is a little bit too low as well. You look at his past games. He has had 195 this past week against Washington. But we saw last night, Thursday Night Football, Washington's defense, especially secondary, hasn't been playing solid. Like they've been doing pretty well, and they're more vulnerable on the ground. Kind of the opposite of what the Ravens defense is. But against better run defenses and worse secondaries, 278 and 264. So 226.5 to me, again, is a little bit low for Russell Wilson. But the bottom line is this Ravens defense is so good on the ground that teams just aren't going to try to run on them. That's how it goes. And it is very interesting because you look at the overall stats for these offenses, these run offenses, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, again, have the 4th most rush attempts. When you look at yards per game, they are 8th in the NFL. Yards per carry efficiency, they're down below, though. That's what I worry about. 4.03. I don't know how much they're going to get past the sticks. I don't know how much they're going to honestly stay ahead of the chains. And I really, really worry about that, especially for a team like the Steelers. I think they're going to do what they can, honestly, to just pass the ball on first down and stay ahead of the chains. You look at success rate, again, Steelers not even in the top half. Like, unless I missed them. I may have missed them. Pittsburgh Steelers, zone success rate, of course. That's zone success rate for the Pittsburgh Steelers. 24th. Then man gap success rate for the Pittsburgh Steelers, 19th. So success rate, again, if you guys don't know what that is, it's essentially staying ahead of the chains, but first down, it means you rush for 3 or more yards. Second down, it means you rush for at least half of what you have to go. So 2nd and 8 if you rush for 4+, and then third down is rushing for a first down. They're not super successful on the ground. It's going to be a pass fest for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's the bottom line. Now, again, we'll keep talking about the Baltimore Ravens offense against this Pittsburgh Steelers defense, but I will tell you guys, again, if you are enjoying this video, all of the information that I'm going to post in regards to the picks, in regards to fantasy start sits, will be on my Twitter or my X. If you guys don't know what that is or don't have it or not following it, I'm going to show you really quick here. So you can search it up right here. At Loeb's Leads, Loebs, Leads, the same handle on YouTube. It's also in my little link tree. It's that X button right there. All of my player projections, my final picks, all of that stuff will be on there. So if you want, or you're watching this video on Friday or Saturday or even Sunday morning and you want to see, okay, what's Max doing for this game, go over there because I guarantee you I will have at least one pick from this game on X. So you want to check out what I'm doing. Full transparency, it's probably going to be George Pickens and somebody else, but we wait to see. That's why you follow X. Let's talk about this Baltimore Ravens offense because you look at some of these past matchups. Mike Tomlin, truthfully, has had Lamar Jackson's number. That's kind of how it's gone, whether you believe it's a scheme thing. I know the Ravens dropped a lot of passes last year. He's had Lamar Jackson's number. But the bottom line is Mike Tomlin hasn't faced Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in the same backfield. This is a different offense. 22 changes things dramatically for the Baltimore Ravens. We're going to start with their coverage matrix again, though, because this Pittsburgh Steelers defense has been really, really good all year. And I'm just going to spoil the coverage matrix offensively. Fantasy points per dropback against man. Who's first? Lamar Jackson. Let me just make sure this is all. Fantasy points per dropback against man. Lamar is 8th in the NFL, 0.6. Then fantasy points per dropback against zone. Lamar is 1st in the NFL at 0.62. So Lamar is good against both. But Lamar picks zone apart. And that's very interesting to note when you look at this Pittsburgh Steelers defense because they do a lot of different things. You look at the man percentages. Pittsburgh Steelers will be playing man, again, very much middle of the pack, 27.8% of the time. You look at zone percentages, though. 68.6, slightly above average. You're going to see a little bit more zone from this Pittsburgh Steelers defense against the Baltimore Ravens. I think Lamar is going to have more success, to be honest with you. Lamar is going to have a lot more success against this zone team, but it's not just because of the coverage they play. So a lot of times when you have a too high look, like a too high shell, teams will be more inclined to run the ball or just check to a run. That's not going to happen as much this year. Look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Dead last in terms of too high shells played against opposing offenses in the NFL. It's actually kind of crazy. It's 29%, which is absolutely nuts to me. They love their one high. That's why they're so good against the run. Like you look at this run defense stat, Pittsburgh Steelers, in terms of overall rush yards per game, they're 4th fewest in the NFL. In terms of overall rush yards per carry, they are 4th fewest in the NFL. Rush attempts, they are 4th fewest in the NFL, technically tied for 3rd. Teams don't run the ball on them. They don't run the ball well on them. And they don't run the ball a lot against them. But the pass defense is what really matters and what we need to look at, especially when you look at the man-zone splits for the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. So you look at target rates for the Pittsburgh Steelers against opposing teams. And, we got offense up. Change this real quick. But you look at target rates for offenses against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and there is a nice little marriage in terms of what they allow and in terms of what the Ravens like to do. So wait for this to load. But overall target rates against the Pittsburgh Steelers, Scroll down a little bit here. Where'd they go? Might have to Command F these guys. Okay, there we go. So the 17th highest out wide target rate at 40%, which is a decent number. Again, compared to Baltimore, it's nothing super crazy compared to them. Slot target rate, 9th highest in the league, 34.1%, right? Remember that number. 9th highest, 34.1%. Inline target rate, 10.4%. 23rd highest. They're not really throwing it inline. And then back target rate, 15.4%. Everything is below average minus the slot target rate. Well, where does Lamar Jackson like to throw the football? I'll let you guys be the judge of that. Slot target rate, 6th highest in the league. Now, we're going to go through the routes, and we're going to talk about who runs the most routes from the slot. But I think you guys could probably guess who this is, right? Zay Flowers. That is going to have to be the guy for the Baltimore Ravens this week. It's going to have to be the guy for the Baltimore Ravens this week. Now, you look at last week, Rashad Bateman's first game back. It's very important to remember that. Mark Andrews actually had more routes from the slot, but Zay Flowers is the true slot receiver. Mark Andrews is going to take a little bit more from the inline position, especially now with Isaiah Likely back. Isaiah Likely is going to take more of those slot routes away from Mark Andrews. So you look at the entire year in terms of slot route percentage for this Baltimore Ravens team. Again, spoiler, it's still Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers is still the guy, but the rate is what we need to look at as soon as this loads. The bottom line is this, though, while we wait for this to load. The Baltimore Ravens are going to throw the football probably a little bit more this week because of how few looks the Pittsburgh Steelers give you defensively. And when they throw the ball more, it's going to be to Zay Flowers. That's the reality. That's the reality. And again, you look at the slot routes. I'll pull this back up for you. You look at the slot routes from this team. Mark Andrews technically has more, but you need to take that with a grain of salt with Isaiah Likely back because Isaiah Likely has almost as many routes per game as Mark Andrews from the slot. It's an important thing to remember. Very, very important thing to remember. And the slot targets very, very clearly favor Zay Flowers. He's getting 3+ slot targets per game. It's pretty ridiculous, guys. It's pretty ridiculous. Zay Flowers is going to have to be the guy again. Baltimore is top 10 in slot target rate offensively, as well as Pittsburgh being bottom 10 in the NFL in terms of overall slot target rate defensively. Now, there is one more thing we do need to talk about, and it is the tight end room because it is a very, very fickle thing with Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, how much they're going to throw and run the ball. The bottom line is the Steelers have given up 168 yards to opposing tight ends the last 4 weeks, which is not a lot. It's about 40 a game. In the entirety of the season, the Pittsburgh Steelers have given up, let's pull this up really quick, have given up, where are we at? Steelers, 361 yards to opposing tight ends. That's about 40 a game there as well. They played 9 games. Love Mark Andrews. Love his slot route participation. I worry about his consistent production with Isaiah Likely being back. And I truthfully worry about Zay Flowers just taking those targets because, again, you saw the slot targets. He has more. He is the slot guy in terms of overall targets. Now, if you want to look at pure route percentage, sure, go ahead. Mark Andrews technically has a higher one. It's because Zay Flowers also gets opportunities out wide. He leads the team in targets. Zay Flowers is the number one guy. And again, Derrick Henry, he's always going to get his carries. How efficient is he going to be? I don't think he's going to be able to be that efficient against this defense. That's the bottom line. The Steelers defense puts an extra guy in the box. They don't give you favorable opportunities, especially when it comes to running the football. Derrick Henry, to me, projected 83 or 84 rushing yards technically. It's low, and he's been pretty good, but the last 3 weeks, he's hit it 1 out of 3 games. They've been throwing the ball a little bit more. The offense looks like a well-oiled machine in the past game. Lamar's playing out of his mind. I'm so much more inclined to look at Zay Flowers. 60 receiving yards, I think, is a little bit low. You look at some of his production. Obviously, the Cincy game was tough, but back-to-back 100-yard games prior to that. Mark Andrews' projection is 39.5. Hit it in 1 of the last 3, and it was a very good matchup against Cincy. This is not a great matchup for tight ends, guys. If I'm picking one thing on this Ravens side, it's Zay Flowers yards. Again, finalized information will be on X, so if you guys aren't following me on there, make sure you do it. Same handle, @LoebsLeads I just showed you. I'll show you again really quick. You can see it right there at Loeb's leads. But George Pickens, Russell Wilson, I don't mind Pat Freiermuth, and then Zay Flowers. Those are the 4 guys I like the most in this game based on what the numbers show. Dive a little bit deeper in terms of past production the next couple days to give you a better sense on X and give you guys my full pick. But if you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate you guys watching. Again, if you're new, you like this type of stuff, make sure you subscribe, especially because tomorrow, or depending on when you're seeing this Saturday, we're going to have a Bills-Chiefs breakdown. And then Sunday, we're going to have a Texans-Cowboys breakdown. 2 more breakdown videos coming out for you guys. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. You can turn notifications on as well. That way it'll pop up on your phone or on your iPad, whatever it may be, when it's out, but 5 p.m. Eastern. God bless you guys. We will see you next time. Enjoy this beautiful rivalry game.